Glaives came out pretty hot when the Witch Queen first came out, then they were dialed back, and then the exotic Glaives was simply a massive letdown. Well, Bungie has got some great news for all of you Glaive fans out there with some big changes coming in Season 17. Well, today I'm going to run through all the changes we got coming to Glaives, so sharpen those pointy sticks right now and get them ready, because Glaives are going to be back in fashion in Season 17. Well, if you're new around here or find this useful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for all the latest Destiny 2 content, and turn on notifications by hitting that bell. And roughly 98% of viewers who watch This Week in Video Games aren't subscribed, so subscribe today and never miss an update. Well, first of all, let's have a look at the information from Bungie, detailed in their latest This Week at Bungie update, and that was last week. So Bungie say, we've noticed that several aspects of how Glaives interact with the weapon and armor perks don't match player expectations, and we want to take some time to clarify the intent, the changes included in Season 17, and the logic we're going to use for future changes. Well, a Glaive melee is a basic melee attack, not a weapon attack, and it doesn't consume ammo and deals kinetic damage. So it's more like an unpowered punch than a sword swing. Allowing buffs to weapon damage to apply to Glaive melees would be too powerful for something without an ammo limitation, particularly in PvP, where even a small damage buff would allow for incredibly fast 2-hit kills. Also in general, we prefer to increase Glaive melee damage directly, as we're doing in fact, instead of effectively making weapon damage perks mandatory on Glaives. Glaives already have a long lunge distance, and increasing this all results in an unreliable behaviour over the network, so no melee lunge distance buffs apply to Glaive melees. Well, Bungie then state their intent for Glaive, so they say, Glaive melee should activate perks that trigger off base melee damage or kills, for example, ammo refill from Grave Robber, weapon damage buff 5 stacks from Swashbuckler, or ammo refill from Sealed Amkara Grasps. Glaive melee should not activate perks that trigger off-powered melee damage or kills, or require expending subclass melee energy, such as Combination Blow or Assassin's Cowl. Glaive melee should benefit from melee damage buffs, such as Winter's Guile or Worm God Caress, and Glaive melee should not benefit from weapon damage buffs, such as Rampage, Kill Clip or Swashbuckler. And Glaive projectiles should benefit from weapon damage buffs. So, with that expectation set, there's some inconsistencies with how these are implemented in the game, some of which we've already fixed, some of which we're going to look at in the future. So once we have these guidelines consistently implemented in the game, we may look at specific cases where this doesn't match player expectations and do something custom, updating descriptions where needed for clarification, but our primary goal is that players are able to predict how Glaive interaction will work. So here's some changes made during Season 16, they're largely bug fixes with some quality of life changes. So Glaive projectile hits reach maximum energy decrease from 6 to 4, and Glaive melee can now be interrupted by a Hunter dodge. The Grave Robber perk now pulls from reserves on Glaives instead of generating ammo, and Glaives no longer get stuck in Clang Recovery when using a melee attack on each other. The Sealed Amkara Grasp no longer reload Glaives on projectile hits, but does on melee hits as expected, and Glaive melees can no longer stunlock high health combatants. And finally, Glaive melee kills are now tracked in match history for bounties and so forth. Well, here's the changes coming in Season 17. So we're pushing Glaives deeper into their roles of hard-hitting melee damage and near-complete protection when shielded, as well as increased projectile speed to make them more reliable at range. Note the Glaive shield grants a 97.5% damage resistance in PvE and 75% in PvP. So we've got increased melee damage versus PvE enemies, except for bosses and vehicles, by 25%. Reduce the energy drain speed when shielded by 30%. Increase the projectile speed dependent on the range stat. So at 0 stat that's increased from 30 to 60 milliseconds, and at 100 stat that's increased from 80 to 100 milliseconds. And then we got exotic Glaives where they've all been buffed, in addition to the global Glaive changes which make them easier to build energy, so the projectile speed making landed shots easier, and energy granted per projectile hit. So we've got a change for all classes. First up, the Titan Glaive, Edge of Action. Players can now gain a Void Overshield while inside a bubble, and the Helm of Saint 14 now applies to this bubble, as it does for Ward of Dawn. So that's really interesting for Titans. Then for the Warlocks with the Edge of Intent, increased speed and acceleration of the healing turret projectiles. And then with the Hunter Glaive, Edge of Concurrence, tripled the damage of the wave detonation and increased the number of enemies it can chain from 4 to 8. So that's doubled the amount of enemies. That's really, really interesting stuff. I'm going to dive into that in a little bit more detail in a second. Well, that is a lot of information there from Bungie, so let's dig into the details a little bit more. First of all, let's have a look at the global changes to Glaives coming in Season 17. And the big improvement is the 25% increase in melee damage increase to PvE enemies. And that is really going to help you run around and stab a bunch of enemies and clear out smaller rooms of adds. And the reduction in the energy drain speed of the shields by 30% is a really, really nice addition too. Although personally, I haven't been using this shield very much when using Glaives. I tend more towards the melee and the projectile damage. I often actually forget about these shields on the Glaives. Although the Glaive shield grants 97.5 damage resistance in PvE. I mean, that is absolutely huge. Plus, you got a 75% damage resistance in PvP. So that is absolutely no joke. Yeah, all in all, these global changes, they're really, really good. And I'm really looking forward to see what the Enigma and Lubre's Ruin can do next season. Well, next then, we've got a look at the exotic glaive changes. You know, it's pretty universal that Destiny fans have been really disappointed by exotic glaives. You know, the grind to get them was pretty long, especially if you got them when they first came out, and the rarity of the red bordered weapons in the Wellspring activity. Now, that was an absolute nightmare. Thankfully, Bungie increased the drop rate of the red bordered weapons Come to Pass and Tarnation, making the completion of the Investigation Board quest much easier now. And I do have a guide on the channel for how to get all of the exotic glaives in Destiny 2, so if you haven't seen that, do check that out. You know, I really think there's something for every class in the updates. Titan, you get another source of an overshield, and then it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Warlocks, because the changes state increased speed and acceleration of the healing turret projectiles. You know, we don't know the speed and the frequency of those projectiles just yet, but it could be very effective for Warlock healing builds, especially if you pair this up with other Solar 3.0 elements, and that could be coming next season too. Well then, we've perhaps got the most exciting change of all, and that is for Hunters. So the change states tripled the damage of wave detonation and increased the number of enemies it can chain from 4 to 8. Now, given the damage has been tripled and the chaining of enemies has been doubled, this is absolutely huge, and it's got the potential to be as impactful as the Trinity Ghoul Catalyst when that first came out. And if you've used Trinity Ghoul with the Catalyst, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't used it, you definitely should. It is one of the most fun weapons in the game. So I really did like the Glaives from the start, and it's always nice to see a new archetype in the game. It really mixes things up and it keeps the game feeling fresh. You know, they definitely needed a bit of love, and it's good to see Bungie acknowledging that. So it's really going to be interesting to see how the Destiny 2 audience reacts to the changes, and we don't have long to wait to find out. Season 17 is only a few weeks away at the end of May. Well, let me know in the comments what you think of the changes coming to Glaives, and do you think it's going to make a difference? Well, that is it for this look at the huge Glaive changes coming to Destiny 2 in Season 17. And as always, thank you so much for watching. For more Destiny 2 content like this, hit that subscribe button down below and subscribe to This Week in Video Games. Or check me out on Twitter at TWIVG Podcast. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, liking and sharing the video would really help me out. Otherwise, check out the other videos on the channel. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you soon.